My best friend blamed me for breaking up her relationship with the school bully and reported me for violating the rules during the college entrance examination. My grades were cancelled. She was admitted to Peking University, as she wished, and broke off our friendship. Many years later, she returned to our alma mater to give a speech as an outstanding graduate. I hid in the corner and peeked at her. When I saw the huge backdrop behind her falling down, I instinctively rushed towards her. When I was in excruciating pain all over my body and my consciousness was fading, I let go of the hand that was tightly holding hers. This is the last time. If there is an afterlife, I won't help you again. Later, we were really reborn together. She was deeply in love with the school bully, Blaze. They skipped classes to go to a concert and made a declaration while reading a self-criticism under the national flag. They were passionate and ostentatious, like wildfire spreading across the prairie, leaving nothing in its wake. As for me, I followed my last words from my previous life. Stayed away from Vivian. And studied hard. She mocked me. You're stupid to begin with. No matter how much you study, you won't be able to get into Tsinghua University or Peking University. It's just a waste of your youth. With the memory of the college entrance examination from her previous life, she fantasized about achieving both academic success and a fulfilling love life. There were 100 days left until the college entrance examination, and Vivian got together with Blaze. The photo of them kissing on the rooftop on a rainy day spread throughout the entire school. Vivian pressed Blaze against an old desk and stood on tiptoe to kiss the young man whose ears were red. She was very quick. She was reborn yesterday and confessed her love today, as if she was afraid that someone would stop her again. I smiled self-deprecating lie in my heart and buried my head in memorizing words. The classmates around me whispered to each other. The throbbing of youth was hidden in the sound of reading and gradually filled the entire classroom. The classmate sitting in front of me kept looking back and casting admiring and envious glances at Vivian beside me. Her textbook was propped up, and her phone was hidden underneath as she chatted with Blaze. Her eyes were bright. Her cheeks were flushed. And she would even giggle when she got excited while chatting. After repeating this several times, I frowned impatiently. Go play outside if you want. Don't disturb others. Vivian raised her eyes and glanced at me, and sneered dismissively, you've already learned it. What's the use of you pretending to be so serious? She paused for a moment, as if thinking of something, and deliberately added, don't worry. As long as you don't violate the rules in the college entrance examination, you will definitely be able to get into a university this time. I gritted my teeth and clenched the book tightly, remembering my experience in my previous life. My heart ached as if pricked by needles, and I felt a bit short of breath. In my previous life, after the English exam, I told Vivian that I didn't stop writing immediately when the bell rang for handing in the papers. She didn't say anything at that time. But a few days later, I was notified that my English grade was cancelled. Someone reported me for violating the exam rules. And the only person who knew about this and also knew my admission ticket number was Vivian. At that time, I ran to confront her. And she smiled even more sarcastically than now. Only you are allowed to expose my puppy love. But I'm not allowed to expose your violation? Diana, this is what you owe me. In the last semester of high school for the college entrance examination, Vivian was pestered by Blaze and complained to me that it affected her studies. At that time, I didn't know that she was just showing off to me. So I told her mother, hoping to help her. As a result, her mother went to Blaze's home, which caused Blaze to transfer schools and eventually fall in love with someone else. I didn't expect her to hold a grudge against me because of this. Nor did I expect that in her heart. My future in life was not as important as her love. I suppressed the surging soreness in my heart and carefully imprinted the words in the textbook in my mind. It was my fault for violating the exam rules in my previous life. And it was also my fault for trusting the wrong person. I admit it all. In this life, I must study even harder to make up for the previous regrets. Vivian was still chatting, her fingertips flying over the phone. On the left side of the textbook in front of her were dense notes, while the right side was completely blank. Since being reborn, she hasn't listened to a single class or taken a single note. She devoted herself wholeheartedly to Blaze. She faked illness and asked for leave to accompany him on his birthday. Skipped classes to watch him play basketball. She even folded stars and wrote love letters for him during class. The head teacher warned her twice after catching her. But it was completely useless. Vivian's textbook became cleaner and cleaner, and the people around her became more and more complicated. She no longer sat at her desk studying all day long. Instead, she preferred to lean on the railing in the corridor and chat with a group of people. The school uniform hung loosely on her, with the zipper open, revealing the limited edition Rendy brand with a huge logo she was wearing underneath. And Blaze would bring her snacks and milk tea during the break. The two of them would flirt and bask in the sun together. Vivian's face was bathed in the sunlight, looking relaxed and gentle, forming a sharp contrast with the classmates in the classroom who were struggling to solve practice problems with furrowed brows. When I passed by while fetching water, I was stopped by her new friends. They put their arms around each other's shoulders and asked with a smile, "Diana, you're working so hard. Are you preparing to apply to Peking University or Tsinghua University?" I was too lazy to pay attention to them and walked straight past them. I vaguely heard Vivian's mocking laughter coming from behind. "Hard work is useless. With your IQ, the best you can get into is a normal university at most." In my previous life, after my English grade was cancelled, I attended a second-tier normal university. Even if my English grade was included, my score was still far from that of Tsinghua University and Peking University and was not worth mentioning at all. I'm not as smart as Vivian. Often, the knowledge that she can absorb in 1 unit of time, I always need 2 or even 3 times as long to fully absorb. In my previous life, even if we spent the same amount of time and effort on studying, I could only follow behind her. This is fate, Diana. No matter how hard you work, you can't compare to me casually flipping through the textbook. Vivian hid under the desk, painting her nails and laughing at me for wasting the second chance of youth given to me by heaven. I ignored her and wrote "hard work pays off" on a sticky note and pasted it on the upper right corner of my desk. Tsinghua University is fine. And Peking University is also okay. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession, I don't believe in such bullshit as fate. In order to have more time to study, I applied to live on campus. After many years, a 3.1-line life of going between the dormitory, classroom, having fulfilled my obsession, and cafeteria every day became my normal routine again. And Vivian and Blaze were also in a passionate love affair. They had small arguments every 2 days and big arguments every 3 days. Every time they quarreled, Vivian would lie on the desk, crying and being sentimental. Then she would look up at the sky at a 45-degree angle and sigh, listening to sad love songs over and over again, until Blaze came to coax her with chocolates. And the two of them made up. After enduring it until the midterm exam was over, I asked the head teacher to apply for a seat change. The head teacher sighed and took out the newly received report card. I looked down the report card. I was the 10th. And Vivian had dropped to behind the top 100. In my previous life, Vivian had never dropped out of the top 10 in the grade. And she was always ahead of me. Vivian's condition has been very poor recently. You have a good relationship with her. Why don't you not change your seat for now and supervise her? I refused immediately. Teacher, I'm also finding it a bit difficult to study recently. I'm afraid I can't help her. I had also forgotten a lot of knowledge. I only managed to get the 10th place after desperately reviewing before the exam. What's more, Vivian didn't need my supervision at all. She wished that I would stay as far away from her and Blaze as possible. On the first day of our rebirth, she had already warned me, "Don't meddle in other people's business this time. Get as far away as you can." So, when I met Vivian's mother in the corridor again, I chose to remain silent. "I'm sorry, Auntie. I really don't know. Why don't you ask Vivian?" Because of this matter in the past, I became the vicious best friend in Vivian's words. She thought that I was jealous of her and couldn't stand to see her doing well, so I deliberately broke up her relationship with Blaze. I never expected to hear the most unbearable words about myself from the mouth of my closest and most trusted friend. We had known each other since kindergarten. I originally thought that we would be friends for a lifetime. Vivian's mother still didn't give up even though she couldn't get an answer. She asked me sharply with a somewhat stern look in her eyes. Aren't you her best friend? Don't you even know? I felt as if I had been slapped in the face. My cheeks were burning and my heart was aching. I shook my head. As soon as the elevator door opened, I broke free from her hand and rushed out. As Vivian wished, I didn't say anything this time. Not only this time, but I won't care about anything related to her in the future. I will stick to the boundaries. Watch from the sidelines. I will focus on respecting and understanding, but not caring. However, even though I had done this, a messy business between Vivian and Blaze couldn't be hidden. The day after the report card was issued, she was asked to invite her parents to school. When I went to the office to find the head teacher, she was talking to Vivian's parents. Vivian stood beside them, infuriately rubbing her newly done black nail polish. I put down the collected test papers and happened to hear her brazenly promise. Don't worry. I won't affect my studies. Scoring 600 or 700 points in the college entrance examination is not a problem. The head teacher looked at her with a somewhat speechless expression on her face and earnestly advised her not to be blindly confident. Unfortunately, Vivian wouldn't listen to reason and couldn't be persuaded at all. She and I had both experienced the college entrance examination once, and we already knew the exam questions clearly. As long as she remembered the original questions and memorized the answers to each question before the exam, it was possible to get a full score in the college entrance examination. I lowered my eyes and was about to slip out quietly, but the head teacher stopped me. Look at your good friend Diana. She has never dropped out of the top 10 in the grade. You should learn from her. This sentence seemed to step on Vivian's minefield. She was like a cat with its fur standing on end, glaring at me with a look of dissatisfaction all over her face. I haven't been serious. If I were serious, she wouldn't even be worthy of holding my shoes. As soon as she said this, all the teachers in the office looked up at her. Her parents also changed their expressions. Vivian's father quickly shouted to stop her from saying any more outrageous things. Vivian's mother looked embarrassed under the gaze of everyone and apologized to me awkwardly. Diana, don't take it too hard. Vivian is in a bad mood because of her poor exam results. You're good friends, so you should understand. I didn't say anything throughout. I greeted the teacher and then returned to the classroom. Not long after, Vivian rushed into the classroom and swept all the things on my desk to the ground. Why is it always you every time? Who do you think you are? You're not even worthy of comparing with me? She pointed at the tip of my nose and cursed, her eyes red as if she had been crying. Before I could react to what was happening, Blaze also chased in. He hugged her from behind and also gave me a cold look for no apparent reason. Then, without a low sigh, in front of the whole class, he pressed Vivian into his arms. Vivian, I only want you in my life. Even if the King of Heaven comes, we won't be separated. Vivian raised her head from his arms and looked into his eyes. She firmly grasped the corner of his clothes and said firmly and affectionately, Blaze, even if we have to fight against the whole world, we will never be separated. The whole class and I stared blankly at their performance until the class bell rang. Blaze had a gentle expression. He took Vivian's hand, interlocked their fingers, and ran out of the classroom. I bent down to pick up the books scattered on the ground and heard the classmates beside me whispering. Vivian's parents forced her to break up with Blaze and even went to Blaze and scolded him severely. They said that if they didn't break up, they would go to his home and his father's company to make a scene. The storyline seemed to have returned to my previous life, and everyone was guessing whether they would break up or not. The study committee member who had been sitting beside me and keeping silent finally stood up and asked everyone to do the newly distributed test paper. I packed my things. I was writing on the math test paper in my hand, but my mind was a bit confused. I originally thought that as long as I remained silent, Vivian wouldn't be able to blame me. But in the end, even getting better grades than her was considered a mistake for me. In my past life, I was so stupid that I still felt a bit of guilt towards her. Looking back now, it's simply ridiculous. You got it wrong. The cold voice of the class monitor suddenly sounded beside me. His gaze was fixed on the question I had just finished answering. After I applied to the head teacher to change my seat last time, I was arranged to sit next to the class monitor. In my impression, this person was a top student who had always ranked first in the grade all year round, and he was low-key and silent. If the top student said I got it wrong, then it must be wrong. I cast aside the messy feelings of discomfort and loss in my mind, gathered my thoughts, and read the question again. The head teacher didn't come to class all the time. She finally rushed in with a dark and angry face just before the class was about to end. And Vivian didn't show up for the whole afternoon afterwards. During dinner time, it started to rain outside. I held an umbrella and went to the cafeteria. When I passed by the playground, I saw a group of people gathering and watching. When I took a closer look, it was Vivian and Blaze. They were running side by side in the rain, letting the raindrops hit their faces. Occasionally, they would turn their heads and look at each other affectionately, smiling at each other. The dean of students stood on the periphery holding an umbrella, scolding them with an ugly expression on his face. I heard that after they ran out of the classroom, they were going to climb over the wall to leave the school, but they were caught red-handed. Suddenly, Vivian stumbled and tripped over her own feet, falling to the ground. Blaze immediately stopped, rushed over, picked her up horizontally, and ran towards the infirmary. The classmates gathered around, holding colorful umbrellas, and automatically made way for him. At this moment, no matter how bright the colors were, they all became the backdrop for them, looking gray and dim. Some people secretly exclaimed that it was so cool and romantic. This is what youth should be like. I turned my head and looked at the timer hanging high on the top of the senior 3 teaching building. There were 80 days left until the college entrance examination. The white characters on the red background were the only bright color against the gray background. The cool raindrops were blown onto my face, and I shivered. I pulled up my school uniform jacket and quickened my pace towards the cafeteria along with the crowd. During the evening self-study, Vivian still didn't come back. I heard that she had a high fever because of getting caught in the rain. At this moment when every second counts, the head teacher actually took out half a class to hold a class meeting. There are only a few dozen days left. Those who want to fall in love, hold on a bit. You can date as you like after you graduate, of course, if you really insist on dating. I can't do anything about it either. A look of pity flashed in her tired eyes. The future is yours. I hope you will be responsible for your own future and also for the future of the other person. The commotion caused by Vivian and Blaze during this period had a great impact, and many classmates were a bit eager to follow suit. But with the college entrance examination approaching, the school couldn't really expel them. They could only give them a demerit and announce a criticism throughout the school. During the flag-raising ceremony on Monday, Vivian and Blaze, who had been missing for several days, each held a self-criticism and stood on the rostrum. Blaze, with his chestnut hair dyed light yellow, picked up the microphone in a slovenly manner. But he didn't intend to give a self-criticism. Sorry for disturbing everyone's study. I promise that I won't show my affection in front of everyone in the future. He was the son of a rich family. After his parents divorced, no one disciplined him. He spent his days fighting, going to bars, and drag racing with the hooligans outside the school. Self-criticisms were already a common occurrence for him, and he didn't feel ashamed at all. Instead, he was a bit proud. I stood in the first row, concentrating on reading the pocket-sized collection of wrong questions, and was indifferent to the farce on the stage. It was not until Vivian started speaking that I raised my eyes and glanced at her. And then I was stunned. She had put on makeup. Her eyelashes were thick and dense, and the black eyeliner traced a beautiful arc from the corner of her eye. Her originally loose school uniform pants had been altered into cropped pants, revealing her slender and white ankles and couple-style sneakers. This wasn't the first time she had spoken on the rostrum, but it was the first time she was reading a self-criticism. She cleared her throat, looked at Blaze, and said in front of all the teachers and students of the school, "I don't regret being with Blaze. And I also promise to the teachers and classmates here that I will definitely be able to get into Tsinghua University or Peking University." This was the second time she had said such a thing, brazenly relying on her memories of her past life. But how could she be so sure that the questions in this year's college entrance examination would be exactly the same as those in her past life? The flag raising ceremony ended hastily, and Vivian and Blaze were invited to the principal's office for a talk again. I followed the crowd back to the classroom. When I passed by the publicity board downstairs of the teaching building, I saw the newly replaced poster. The selection results of the school's top 10 excellent students were out. My name and photo were posted in the most prominent position. In my past life, that position belonged to Vivian. She even disliked that the photo was taken so ugly that she would rather not have it. Now, as she wished, she started to sneer at me again. It's just being one of the top 10. What's so great about it? A few days later, my photo was defaced. There was also a big poster pasted next to it. The title was, "Is the daughter of a murderer also called excellent?" I stared at that piece of paper, feeling as if I had fallen into an ice cellar, and my whole body was trembling. Many people were gathering and watching. Some of my classmates who knew me turned their heads to look at me. I squeezed into the crowd and tore off that piece of paper. On the rooftop, I found Vivian, who was leaning in Blaze's arms and trying to grab a cigarette. "Did you paste this?" I threw the crumpled paper onto her face, and she let out a scream and hid in Blaze's arms. Blaze threw away the cigarette, pulled Vivian behind him, and pushed my shoulder with his hand. "Are you tired of living? How dare you touch my woman?" He was strong and his push was heavy. I was pushed to the ground. My palm rubbed against the rough cement floor, feeling swollen, painful, and burning, and the pain went straight to my heart. The matter about my father was my biggest secret. No one in the school except Vivian knew about it. She once swore that she wouldn't tell anyone. Even though our relationship was so bad, I never thought that she would use this to hurt me. "Aren't you afraid of retribution?" I stood up and stared at Vivian with my eyes fixed on her, feeling desolate in my heart. She once said that if it was leaked out, she would be haunted by bad luck for the rest of her life. Retribution? Which sentence on this isn't the truth? Your father is a murderer after all. Vivian hid behind Blaze and bluffed, and her eyes changed from being guilty to determined, and in just a few seconds, she sneered at me condescending. "I'm just raising a reasonable question about the selection result. Is that not allowed?" I looked at her completely unfamiliar face and couldn't figure out where the problem was. In my past life, I truly regarded her as a friend, as the person I trusted the most, and I shared everything with her. Now, all the secrets that I had whispered in the dead of night were all laid out in the open by her, turning into sharp swords stabbing at me. It felt like there was a ball of cotton stuck in my throat. It took me a great deal of effort to ask the question that had been pent up in my heart: why? Vivian seemed to have heard the most ridiculous joke. She looked at me up and down with a contemptuous look in her eyes. "Diana, don't you really think that I regarded you as a good friend? Why don't you find a mirror and take a look? Do you deserve it?" The girls watching nearby burst into laughter. They came up to her and affectionately took her arm. Someone took out the mobile phone that they had secretly brought into the school from their pocket, turned on the front camera, and grabbed my hair, forcing me to look at the camera. In the camera, I had a sallow face, heavy dark circles under my eyes, and there were also red and swollen pimples on my forehead. The washed-out and baggy school uniform was wrapped around my body, and the canvas shoes with slightly open glue were wrinkled. I raised my hand to resist, but they held me down firmly, and they clamored to put on makeup for me with expired lipstick. Vivian leaned against Blaze. The sunlight was warm and gentle, and the breeze blew her fluffy and shiny bob hair. She was like a divine girl, and her eyes looking at me were filled with a mixture of pity and mockery. "Don't bully our top 10 excellent student. She's really pitiful. Her family is very poor. Her mother works in a massage parlor, washing and massaging men's feet to support her education. She also gets the subsidy for poor students every year. One year, she didn't get the subsidy quota. Her mother even came to the school to beg the head teacher and knelt down in the office. I saw it with my own eyes." Blaze lit another cigarette. As soon as he took a puff, he was choked and burst into laughter while coughing. "Damn it. This is so pathetic. If she's this poor, what's the point of going to school? She might as well go to a factory and work as a screwdriver." He put his arm around Vivian and kissed her cheek tenderly. "Honey, stay away from her in the future. Don't get contaminated by her poverty. You're going to be a wealthy lady when you marry me in the future. The lackeys beside them also laughed and brandished the lipstick towards my face. The class bell rang. I had nowhere to run and was slapped hard by one of them. Don't be ungrateful. Let you go after putting on some lipstick. I was slapped so hard that I felt dizzy. In a trance. I heard a roar. What are you doing? Everyone was startled and turned around one after another. The head teacher, the dean of students, and the principal were all standing at the door of the rooftop. I gritted my back teeth and tried my best to raise my swollen cheek. Tears rolled down from the corners of my eyes. Teacher. I want to call the police. Vivian's rosy face turned pale instantly. She was at a loss in the face of this sudden change. She was immersed in her unrestrained youth and forgot that I was no longer the fragile girl I used to be. I am mature in my thinking and have a tough soul. No humiliation is enough to destroy me. I will fight back one by one against those who humiliate me. The door of the principal's office was tightly closed. I held my mother's hand and faced Vivian and her parents. Except for them, none of the parents of the other people came. The police also came. But since all those people were minors, and Vivian was still a month away from being an adult, and they didn't actually cause any physical harm to me, so they advised me to handle it through negotiation. I don't accept the apology. Just deal with it according to the school regulations. According to the school regulations, those who insult and beat up classmates, if the circumstances are serious, will be placed on probation at school, and their parents will be required to take them home for education until they repent. Before I went to the rooftop to find Vivian, I had already asked someone to call the head teacher and the dean of students. If Vivian tries to mess with me once, there will be a second time. I still have the college entrance examination to prepare for, and I don't have time to play this game with her. Since she doesn't want to study and just wants to fall in love, she can go home and have a good time dating. Vivian's mother's face changed drastically. There are still more than 2 months until the college entrance examination. Diana, your request is a bit too much, isn't it? If Vivian doesn't perform well in the college entrance examination because of this incident, can you take the responsibility? She resorted to moral and emotional blackmail one after another. Besides, aren't you and Vivian like sisters? You know that Vivian likes to joke around. She didn't even lay a hand on you throughout the whole process. Even my mother, who was always gentle, turned dark-faced. She wanted to say something, but I held her back. Your daughter doesn't regard me as a sister. I'd better not flatter myself. I smiled without any warmth, and my attitude was very firm. If you don't deal with it according to the school regulations, I will pursue the legal responsibilities of all of them and file a case directly. As soon as they heard that a case was going to be filed, the people huddled in the corner all looked up in horror. Blaze clenched his fist and stepped forward, pulling Vivian behind him to shield her. This matter is mainly my responsibility. It has nothing to do with her. If you have the guts, come at me. Vivian wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she pulled Blaze aside and challenged me in front of the police. Who are you scaring? File a case then. If you have the guts, send us all to jail. In the end, even the police couldn't stand it anymore. They loudly scolded them and gave them a round of legal education. The 2 of them were scolded severely and reluctantly accepted the school's punishment. After writing the guarantee letter, they were taken home. I accompanied my mother to the school gate. She was still puzzled. What's wrong with that girl Vivian? She used to seem so well behaved and sensible. She told me to study hard and that I'd better not get too close to Vivian in the future. It's not just that I won't get close to her. I even wish I could avoid seeing her for the rest of my life. I even feel a bit ashamed that I used to know her and went in and out with her. The campus without Vivian and Blaze is much fresher in the air. However, my heart seems to be empty. The air I breathe in turns into a raging cold wind in my chest. Vivian and I used to lie on the same bed and fantasize about the future. We agreed to get into the same university and graduate together. Then we would make money and build our careers together and be each other's bridesmaids. Our significant others would also become good friends. And our babies would become close friends just like us. Finally, we would hold hands and move in a nursing home together. and find a handsome old man to dance square dancing with. I once swore to be Vivian's best friend for life. And I valued her more than myself. In the end, everything turned out to be fake, just my own wishful thinking. The hole in my heart is getting bigger and bigger, blown by the cold wind. But on the surface, I become more and more calm. The head teacher told me that the school would issue an official document, and my father's matter wouldn't affect me. My quota as one of the top 10 outstanding students was approved through layers of review by the school, and there was no problem at all. I held my head high and returned to my seat, ignoring the strange looks from my classmates around me. The study committee member, who had been always bending over his desk to solve practice problems, turned around mercifully and glanced at me. His gaze stayed on my still swollen right face for a few seconds. And he took out several test papers from his desk drawer and placed them in front of me. I stared at the test papers that were cleaner than my face, and the cold wind in my heart suddenly stopped. I took a deep breath, resigned myself to concentrating on doing the test papers, and had no time to think about anything else at all. When the countdown to the college entrance examination stopped at 40 days, the results of the last joint examination in the whole city came out. I scored 666 points, which was better than any score I got in my previous life. On the same day, Vivian also returned to school. Just last weekend when I got home, Vivian's parents came to my house with gifts and tonics they bought for me. They begged me to forgive Vivian and let her come back to school to attend classes. She had stayed at home for a month. Not only did she refuse to study at home, but she also tried every means to run out and date Blaze every day. Her parents had scolded her and even beaten her, but it was still of no use. Vivian even threatened them with self-harm, cutting her skin with a small knife and leaving deep and shallow scars on her arms. If they dared to force her to break up or cause trouble for Blaze, she would kill herself in front of them. In this life, she managed to lock herself in a relationship with Blaze completely in this way as she wished. Diana, please. Auntie is begging you. Let Vivian come back to school. I'll let her live on campus just like you and stay far away from that boy. Vivian's mother had tears in her eyes, and her face was even more haggard than it was a month ago. In fact, Vivian's family situation was just average. Her parents had run a breakfast shop at the entrance of the community for more than 10 years. They got up early and went to bed late to earn money to support Vivian's studies. And they had given her the best of everything they could. In the past, whenever Vivian's mother met someone, she would show off that her daughter was a top student in one middle school, and she also liked to ask my mother about my grades. After learning in detail, she would generously wave her hand and ask Vivian to teach me more and help me improve my grades too. In fact, like Vivian, she looked down on me in her heart and took it for granted that I was not as good as her daughter. Even now, she still holds my hand with hope and imagines the future. When our Diana gets into a good university, we will definitely invite you and her mother to have a big meal. I almost couldn't hold back my laughter and was glad that she didn't have the memories of her previous life. Otherwise, it would definitely be very embarrassing. After Vivian was admitted to Peking University and broke up with me in the previous life, Vivian's mother blocked me on WeChat. Even though we lived door to door and met in the corridor, she never paid attention to me again. Since that's the case, then let them have a good look at how their daughter is a hopeless case. I agreed to their request, but the condition was that Vivian's guarantee letter should be posted on the bulletin board until the end of the college entrance examination. The day before going back to school, I sorted out all the things related to Vivian in my house. I originally wanted to return them to her, but when I got to her doorstep, I heard a fierce argument inside. Vivian had stolen the family's bank card to help Blaze scrape together the money to buy a motorcycle. It's just 100,000 yuan. When I earn 1,000,000 yuan a year in the future, I'll pay you back 500,000 yuan. Consider the other 400 taels and yuan as interest. She said impatiently amidst the crying of Vivian's mother and the scolding of Vivian's father. In her previous life, after graduating from university, she entered the investment banking industry. The prestigious university was her admission ticket. Coupled with her good looks and outstanding ability, she indeed earned 1,000,000 yuan a year within a few years. So she probably wouldn't care about these old things left with me. I turned around and left the apartment building, and threw the bag in my hand into the trash can. After Vivian returned to school, she found me the first thing. What's the use of getting such a high score? Can you remember all the questions of the college entrance examination clearly? She propped her hands on the table, and the fresh tattoo exaggerity it covered half of her arm. The most eye-catching part was the abbreviations of her and Blaze's names. Under the tattoo, deep and shallow scratches could still be seen. Blaze's arm was also like this. I had seen it in the QQ space she posted. The scars that were considered ugly in others' eyes were the medals of love that they were proud of. Seeing that I didn't pay attention to her, Vivian leaned forward and looked straight at me, deliberately lowering her voice. We can cooperate. The two of us can piece together all the exam questions based on our memories. And you can choose either Tsinghua University or Peking University at will. As the college entrance examination was getting closer and closer, she finally started to get anxious. Unfortunately, hadn't fulfilled my SI. She couldn't remember all the questions of the college entrance examination that year either, so she had to come to me. I didn't even bother to give her an extra glance and took out the English words from the desk drawer to read. She was about to say something more when the head teacher just entered the classroom. Seeing her, the head teacher frowned and scolded, "Vivian, if you don't study yourself, don't affect other classmates." Vivian rolled her eyes, straightened up reluctantly, and before leaving, she ridiculed me. "You're so pretentious. You will definitely come to beg me." I don't know where she got the confidence from. I've never said that I need that test paper. She seemed to be more eager for it. She would ponder over a blank piece of paper every day. In 10 days, she could only remember the questions on half a piece of paper, and the questions of various subjects were mixed together without any order. During this period, she came to meet Weiss more, and I still refused to say anything. That night, I was locked outside the dormitory. Under the threat of Vivian, my roommates didn't dare to open the door for me. "Diana, I'm sorry. Her boyfriend Blaze is someone we can't afford to mess with." Since Vivian returned to school, she had been forced to live in the dormitory. Her mother even insisted that we share the same dormitory, saying that we could take care of each other. She really took care of me. She came up with endless ways to torment me every day. My clothes started to disappear for no reason, and my facial cleansing towels were smeared with paint. Sometimes even my bed was wet, and I could only go to the classroom and piece the desks together to sleep. Occasionally, having fulfilled my obsession, when I couldn't fall asleep, I would get up and recite books with a flashlight, or overlook the school at 4 o'clock in the morning by the moonlight. But I definitely wouldn't be able to stand it for a long time, and it would affect my review. So I usually finished my lunch quickly and then went back to the dormitory to catch up on sleep. At noon, everyone was resting in the classroom. I didn't expect to run into Vivian at this time too. She was stepping on the ladder of the upper bunk, as if she was just about to get out of bed. She was also surprised to see me. I stopped at the door and saw that she was only wearing a close-fitting camisole nightdress. Her young and just developed curves were just right outlined. Her hair was messy. Her cheeks were flushed, and there was a layer of moisture in her eyes. I followed her guilty look and glanced up at her bed. Through the unfastened and bed curtain, I saw a boy's arm. Vivian immediately ran down and blocked my view defensively. "What are you looking at?" I pretended that nothing had happened and left after getting my things. In the classroom, everyone was taking a nap with their heads on the desk, and some people were still writing vigorously. My steadfast desk mate had been sitting upright and solving practice problems without moving since I left. I sat down quietly. Just as I was about to lie down for a while, I heard him ask, "Which university are you going to apply to?" I blinked before I reacted, and rested my head on my arm and said, "Peking University. I guess. In my previous life, my goal was also Peking University. This time, I want to make another sprint." The study committee member nodded, and his gaze fell back on the textbook again. My upper and lower eyelids were fighting, and I slowly closed my eyes and fell asleep. One noon a few days later, I saw Vivian secretly going back to the dormitory alone again. After the lunch break, I heard that the dormitory supervisor personally pulled Blaze out of Vivian's bed. Both of them were in disarray. Blaze was even left with only his underwear on. And many people saw it. So with 20 days left until the college entrance examination, they were asked to go home again. This time the consequence was serious. And they were only allowed to return to school until the college entrance examination. Blaze's father came to the school in person to take him back to their hometown in Shanghai. Vivian chased after the Bentley in the rain, crying as she ran. Finally, having fulfilled and sorry, she sat down on the ground and let the rain soak her through. She was just like the heroine in a youth novel. A few days later, the head teacher privately asked me if I knew where Vivian was. After she was taken home, she ran out of the house with a high fever and had been missing for 2 days. I remembered the status update Vivian posted this morning. The one I love is separated from me by mountains and seas. But mountains and seas can all be crossed. The accompanying picture was of her sitting behind Blaze on his motorcycle, with a bright smile. Behind them was a huge concert promotion poster. It was a singer that Vivian and I had liked since junior high school. He was going to hold his first concert in Shanghai tomorrow. We used to listen to his songs with one earphone each and agreed to save money together to attend his concert after graduation. However, I didn't tell the head teacher all these things. I reported it to the dormitory supervisor before because she provoked me first. In order not to affect my studies, I had no choice but to get her out of the way. Now she hasn't provoked me. And I still respect her choice. However, after the teacher made many inquiries, she still found out that Vivian had run off to Shanghai. Unfortunately, having fulfilled before her parents could catch her back, she and Blaze had an accident. After listening to the concert, they went racing and fell down the hillside on the mountain road. Fortunately, heading fulfilled there were grass and trees to cushion the fall, and they only had minor fractures and some scratches. However, Vivian's chin was scratched by a branch, leaving a long scar. Whether it could heal completely depended on luck. Otherwise, she could only spend a large amount of money on plastic surgery. When I went home to get my change of clothes, I heard her making a scene at home, threatening to live or die. Finally, heading to Phonely, Blaze came and swore in front of her parents that he wouldn't abandon her. I love you for who you are. No matter what you become, you are the most beautiful in my eyes. Vivian finally stopped crying and smiled. With 10 days left until the college entrance examination, she returned to school wearing a mask. She was like a general who had won a battle, holding Blaze's arm with her head held high. The followers around her called her Vivian, and admired her courage to chase after love from afar. She raised the corners of her mouth proudly. Youth is meant to be crazy. Unlike some people who only know how to study like a nerd, they are extremely boring. Yeah. I would never want a girl like that even if I were killed. She's so fucking disgusting. Some people also chimed in, huddling together and laughing lewdly. I passed by pretending not to hear their veiled insinuations. However, on the way, I was still caught up by Vivian's lackeys. Without asking or explaining, they dragged me to a rental house about 200 meters away from the school. Vivian was sitting on the sofa, and Blaze was playing games in the bedroom. The room was filled with the atmosphere of daily life, and it seemed that they had been living here for a while. They actually started living together secretly from everyone. When there were only me and Vivian left in the living room, she directly slapped a piece of paper and a pen on the tea table. Either write out the exam questions now, or we'll be locked up together until the end of the college entrance examination. Neither of us will have a good time. Now she didn't even bother to pretend. Holding a cigarette in her hand, she looked just like a street ruffian. The girl who was gentle and bright as the morning sun, hidden deep in my memory, was nowhere to be found. I curled my lips sarcastically, sat down by the sofa, picked up the pen, and wrote down all the questions. Vivian had always been a talented student in her studies. She never organized her collection of wrong questions and just threw them away after doing them. Unlike me, I had more than a dozen books of collected wrong questions. And I had even organized all the college entrance examination questions. Those exam questions that she couldn't remember even if she scratched her head, I had done countless times in my heart. In less than 2 hours, I copied down all the exam questions of all subjects in the previous life's college entrance examination from memory. I thought you were so high and mighty. Turns out you've already memorized them all by heart. Vivian looked through them slowly and showed a contemptuous smile as if she had already expected it. I looked at her confident appearance and didn't refute. I put down the pen and left. She looked at the questions I had written. And her smile became more and more arrogant. Naturally. She didn't see the expression of me chuckling and shaking my head. Vivian let out a low sigh. You really deserve it for coming to this. Later. I don't know what Vivian said to Blaze. But he actually believed that these were the college entrance examination question. In the last few days, the two of them held those pieces of paper with the answers already written on them and desperately memorized them by rote. It was only at the moment before entering the college entrance examination room that Vivian finally put away those crumpled papers with satisfaction. Diana. If I get into Tsinghua University or Peking University and we can become alumni, we can still be friends. I smiled at her, took a deep breath, and walked into the examination room. In the first Chinese exam, I opened the test paper and saw the first question. I was stunned for a moment. And then a smile spread across my face. The two-day exam passed by in a flash like a dream. I walked into the classroom. And Vivian immediately rushed over like a madman and grabbed my shoulders. Why? Why are they different? How is that possible? She looked at me in disbelief, questioning me over and over again. The college entrance examination papers were completely different from those in the previous life. And her memorization was in vain. I calmly watched her go crazy and watched the pride in her eyes shatter piece by piece. You already knew, didn't you? Why didn't you remind me? Realizing that she couldn't get an answer, she started with conspiracy theories again. Just like before. Once the result wasn't what she wanted. It was my fault. You were the one who told me to get lost as far as possible and stop meddling in your business. I sneered and pushed her hand away, throwing back the words she had said to me before. Besides, who am I? You're so much better than me. Why should you listen to me? Although I don't believe in fate, I believe in cause and effect. As you sow, so shall you reap. Since she was reborn, she hadn't seriously done any test papers. But I had. The mock exam papers set by the teacher had changed. And there were many questions and question types that I had no impression of in my previous life. Fate, just like our rebirth, was changing bit by bit. This current situation was all a result of her own choices. Vivian stood there stunned, staring at me with wide eyes. I don't know if she was thinking that her past glory had finally come to nothing, or if she was thinking that all the promises she had made before had become a joke. I packed up my desk and walked out of the classroom. White papers fluttered down from the rooftop like snowflakes. The young boys, like the wind, chased and made a racket as they rushed past me. The countdown to the college entrance examination had reached 0. But youth became vivid at this moment. I went home, changed out of my school uniform, put on a dress, and put on makeup. Then I went out and spent the whole night having fun with my newly made friends. The next day, I took the train to Delhi, and then traveled northward all the way, spending a month on the Yunnan and Tibet line. The next time I saw Vivian was at my entrance ceremony for university. She was sitting beside her parents, with no makeup on, looking like a well-behaved girl again. When my mother pulled me over to offer a toast, Vivian's mother and father looked embarrassed and awkward. The scene where they said they would treat us to a big meal was still vivid in my memory. But now they were the ones attending my banquet instead. I got 690 points in the college entrance examination. I wasn't the top scorer, but it was enough for me to get into Peking University. As for Vivian, I heard that she didn't even meet the requirements for a junior college and was going to repeat the senior year. But she was so famous in her alma mater, and none of the school teachers were willing to accept her. She and Blaze were now trying to find a way to transfer to another school. Diana has always been down to earth and diligent since she was a child. Auntie knew you would definitely get into a good school. Unlike our naughty girl. There was genuine envy in Vivian's mother's eyes. She took out a thick red envelope from her bag and stuffed it into my hand. Anyway, since the school hasn't started yet, could you please give Vivian some tutoring? We'll pay the tutoring fee according to the market price. I held the red envelope and looked at Vivian, thinking she would lose her temper as she used to. But instead of getting angry, Her eyes immediately welled up with tears. And her voice was choked. Diana. She called me by my old name and carefully grasped my hand. I know I was wrong. For the sake of our once good relationship, can you please help me? She looked at me expectantly. On the surface, she looked pitiful. But deep in her eyes, there was a strong sense of unwillingness. On the day when the college entrance examination results came out, I don't know who the smart guy was, but they released the video of Vivian promising to get into Tsinghua University or Peking University. Now that video has gone viral on the school's online forum and QQ space. And it gets new mockery every day. Diana. I swear I'll study hard this time. I also want to get into Peking University. Then we can study and have meals together again. Vivian held my hand and made many promises to me and envisioned a lot of things. She was really good at acting coquette sly and could easily coax people into giving in. I used to fall for her tricks. So I let her call me around as she pleased. But now, I feel sick when I hear these words. I turned my hand and returned the red envelope to her mother. Sorry. I'm not available. The teacher asked me to go to school in advance to work on a project. You're so smart. You should be able to become the provincial top scorer even by self-studying. Right? Vivian's face immediately changed. She tore my hand away violently. Her face contorted with anger. What are you so arrogant about? You're just luckier than me. What's there to show off? You're the kind of person who studied for so long but couldn't even become the top scorer. Do you dare to make a bet? If I really become the top scorer, you'll kneel down and kowtow to me. The guests saw this and started whispering to each other. Their eyes were full of mockery. And no one believed her words. Everyone knew that the daughter of the Vivian family didn't study hard and liked to mess around with people outside. Her life was in a mess. Vivian's mother and father didn't dare to raise their heads amidst the gossip. They pulled Vivian and left in a hurry. After that day, Vivian's mother spent a lot of money hiring tutors to give her tutoring. But within a week, 4 tutors were driven away in anger. On QIXI festival, she even skipped class and went to a temple with Blaze to pray for love and academic success. It seemed that she believed more in the Buddha than in studying hard. That night, I deleted all my contact information with Vivian, including that of her parents. Before the school started, I took my mother to Beijing with me. On the day of the freshman registration, I met the class monitor at the freshman reception. Hey, having fulfilled my obsession. Didn't you go to Tsinghua University? In the previous life, he was the provincial top scorer. After going to Tsinghua University, he lost touch with his classmates. I only occasionally heard from others that he was very capable and directly stayed at the university to teach after getting his Ph.D. Of course. In this life, he was still the top scorer. But he chose Peking University instead of Tsinghua University. His eyes flickered. With my score, I can choose whatever I want. I was stunned for a moment. And then I thought it made sense. With talent and a willingness to work hard, he could make any choice. As for those who were overly proud and unwilling to work hard, they didn't even have the opportunity to choose. In the college entrance examination the next year, Vivian and Blaze still didn't get into university. In the end, Blaze was stuffed into a private junior college by his father with money. Vivian was still unwilling and chose to repeat the senior year again. As a result, she got pregnant during the repeat year. And her repeat study came to an end. After that, I rarely heard any news about them. It was not until a class reunion several years later that a classmate who went back to teach at our alma mater talked about them. She gave birth to a daughter for Blaze. But his parents wouldn't even let her in the door. That so-called love is worthless in the eyes of the rich. That was several years ago. I heard that Blaze later cheated on her and found a younger and more beautiful girl behind Vivian's back. He even had a mistress? But I heard that his family is on the verge of bankruptcy and owes the bank a huge debt. Everyone talked animatedly, piecing together the fragmented lives of Vivian and Blaze. I remained silent the whole time. After everyone had almost finished eating, I quietly went out and paid the bill. When I returned to the private room, I was stopped by a familiar voice. I could tell it was Vivian. She came to the class reunion but didn't go in. She walked out from the corner and stood still in front of me. She didn't look like she was doing well. Her hair was dry and her clothes were cheap. Even in summer. She was wearing long sleeves, covering the tattoos on her arms completely. A long time ago, we promised each other that if one of us became rich first, we would be responsible for supporting the other to live a carefree life. Now I have become an elite lawyer and have the ability to support her. But between us, we are no longer in a relationship where we can support each other. Diana, I heard you became a lawyer. Vivian pursed her lips and smiled at me somewhat awkwardly. When she smiled, the scar on her chin became more obvious. I want to consult you about a divorce. If it's about work. I interrupted her and handed her a business card. This is my assistant's business card. You can make an appointment with her for a time. Vivian was taken aback for a moment, then took the business card awkwardly and thanked me. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. I nodded distantly and didn't invite her into the private room. I walked straight past her. Just as I was about to enter the private room, she stopped me again. After a long silence, she asked, if I had made the same choice as you back then, would the result be different from what it is now? When she asked this question, she actually already had the answer in her heart. But youth is gone, and one can never be young again. She no longer has the opportunity to make a new choice. I didn't answer her and walked into the room on my own. When the door opened, someone inside shouted, she played a good hand of cards so poorly. She deserves it. In the end, Vivian didn't come to consult me about the divorce anymore. She asked my assistant and learned that my consultation fee was 30 yuan per hour. Then, let out a low sorry. One day later, I went to a concert. My client knew that I had liked a certain popular singer for many years and gave me VIP tickets. That night, I sat in the best seat. And the seat beside me was empty. She once mocked me, you're stupid. No matter how much you study, you can't get into Tsinghua University or Peking University. You're just wasting your youth. I quietly listened to the popular songs that were popular all over the streets and alleys 10 years ago. The endless test papers. The countless words to memorize. And the endless exams deep in my memory all turned into a golden glow. That was my youth. It wasn't magnificent or hysterical. I was diligent and down to earth, taking one step at a time and working hard to get everything I wanted. The end of the full text.